This article is about the Russian camera and photographic equipment brand. For the astronomic or geodetic instruments directed to the zenith, see Zenith camera. For other uses, see Zenit. Zenit is a Russian camera brand manufactured by KMZ in the town of Krasnogorsk near Moscow since 1952 and by Belomo in Belarus since the 1970s. The Zenit trademark is associated with 35mm SLR cameras. Among related brands are Zorky for 35mm rangefinder cameras, MOSKVA and Iskra for medium-format folding cameras and Horizon for panoramic cameras. In the 1960s and 1970s, they were exported by Mashpriba and Torg to 74 countries. The name is sometimes spelled Zenith in English, such as the manuals published by the UK Zenit importer TOE. However, TOE's imported camera bodies as from 1963 retain the Zenit badges. The early Zorky-based models before that time were labeled Zenith in a handwritten style of script. History Early years The above Zenit was based on the Zorky rangefinder camera. In transforming the Zorky into an SLR, the simplest approach was taken. The rangefinder housing was removed from the top and replaced by a plain ground glass screen and prism. A mirror was added below, with a rope and pulley setting system, and the M39A, one-thread mount was pushed forward to make room for the mirror inside. During the first years of production, Zenit camera development coincided with that of the Zorky cameras. The Zenit S had PC synchro for external flash units, and the Zenit 3M also had an RF sibling, the Zorky 6. For an SLR, the pentaprism of all classical Zenits was undersize, with the viewfinder showing about two-thirds of the actual frame size. Zenit E and its successors . During 1967 through 1969, KMZ built an automatic die-cast molding line, allowing mass camera production. Camera production switched to the M42A, one thread and an instant return mirror was also developed. This led to one of the most famous Zenits, a Zenit E, which saw over 12 million produced. A heavy and tough camera with a mechanism that was of exceedingly simple design along the lines of, what isn't there, can't go wrong. Automatic diaphragm functionality was not available until the introduction of the Zenit EM, which used a direct mechanism linking the shutter release button to the aperture mechanism, significantly increasing the effort required to release the shutter. Production included both M39A, 1 and M42A, 1 mounts for the Zenit E and Zenit B models. Later models were only produced in the M42A, 1 with the Pentax K mount available for the latest models. Towards the end of the 20th century, the Zenit E heritage became an obstacle to the development of more modern Zenit models. This was because almost all low-end Zenits until the recent 412DX have been based on the Zenit E die-cast chassis, complying with the local philosophy that a crude but affordable camera was better than no camera. The major events of the further development of Zenit E line was, introduction of an automatic jumping diaphragm on the Zenit EM, TTL metering system on the Zenit TTL, switching to the Pentax K mount, a Zenit 122K, DX code introduction, a Zenit 412DX. Zenit E was sold also with the Moscow 1980 Olympic Games symbolics. Advanced models . The first attempt to make high-end professional camera by KMZ was the start in 1958. This camera had a full set of shutter speeds, a lens with an automatic diaphragm and a unique breech lock mount, and even a knife for cutting off part of the unexposed film. The photographer could choose between a pentaprism and waist-level finders. The grave disadvantage of the start is blamed on lack of lenses. Only one lens was ever made for the proprietary start mount directly. With the success of the Zeiss Icon Contour Flex of the mid-50s and its follow-ups in form of the Bessomatic, Retina and Paxed Reflex, Zenit's next attempt was the Zenit 4, -5 and -6 cameras. These were based on a Voigtler currency and Bessomatic type mount with compare-type iris shutter near the lens elements. The poor durability and high manufacturing cost of this concept, in contrast to the classical bare-bone Zenit design based on ultimate simplicity, showed KMZ to have taken a wrong track. Nevertheless, the Zenit 5 was the first Soviet motor-driven SLR camera, and the first Soviet zoom lens featured in the Zenit 6. Following this, there were two more attempts to make high-end photographic equipment, namely the Zenit 7 and Zenit D. Both were based on the completely new cloth curtain shutter construction. The Zenit D had automatic exposure mode. Its shutter was sped up to achieve X-sync at 1/125. Each of these had its own bayonet mount which helped to utilize the camera's most advanced features. There were plans to develop a full line of optics for these cameras, but the new shutter was too complicated and unreliable. Production was cancelled shortly after, and the only lens made for new mounts were the standard types. Ironically, the start, Zenit 7 and Zenit D utilized the same normal lens, a Helios 44 and 2/58. The Zenit D is one of the rarest Zenit cameras, only 63 cameras were produced. The Zenit 12 XP with its Helios f2/58mm lens and cloth shutter was widely sold by U.S. Eastern camera stores. Many with the Zenit name covered with their USA brand. This metallic rebadge was easy enough to gently pry off to see the true name Zenit. The TTL meter was fairly accurate and took decent shots. The 1981 price was $110 USA. The Russians believed that 58mm more closely matched the human normal range than the standard 50mm used worldwide as a normal lens. It also had a T setting for timed exposures, making it a good choice for yearly fireworks displays. The T setting locked the shutter open, allowing a tripod-mounted camera to be used with an index card to manually open for few bursts of fireworks and then close and reset. After one more unsuccessful camera which was produced in very small quantities, in 1979 production of the Zenit 19 began. This was a camera with an original electromagnet-driven focal plane shutter, M42 lens mount, and shutter speeds from 1 second to 1/1000. X-sync at 1/60 or 1/125. The camera has only manual shooting mode. The Zenit 19 was, perhaps, the top-of-the-line Soviet M42 lens mount camera. Pentax K mount series In 1984 the Zenit Automat entered production. This had a Pentax K mount and a focal shutter with horizontal travel cloth curtains. The only operation mode was aperture priority. The camera was modified in 1988, to include shutter FZL-84 with vertical travel metal curtains, and was reissued as the Zenit AM. The Zenit AM2 was a cheaper version of the AM without the self-timer. Next in line was the Zenit APK. Its distinguishing feature was the introduction of a manual shutter mode in addition to aperture priority. The original FZL-84 shutter was also changed to a licensed Copal square shutter. The most recent model is the Zenit KM of 2001. This is the second microprocessor-controlled camera in the Zenit range, and the second motor-driven SLR camera built by KMZ. Shutter speeds range from 1/2000 to 1 second. X-sync is 1/125 second, and the camera includes both manual shutter and aperture priority modes as well as DX coding from 50 to 3200 ISO. In 2004, the KM received some improvements and was renamed to the Zenit KM Plus. The Zenit KM Plus was the final Zenit camera to be produced. As of 2005 all SLR camera production at the Krasnogorsk factory ceased. These highly interesting Ultimate Zeniths would have been major sellers on Western markets during the SLR decade of the 1970s. However, they appeared at a time when their market segment was saturated with second-hand equipment, so no major importer looked at them. One of the characteristics of Soviet camera manufacture was that the capability of its designers was well ahead of that of its policy makers. The 20-year overdue replacement of the external selenium cell of the Zenit E by TTL metering is said to be the work of an employee who made a conversion on his own accord. Soviet export policy In the West, the success of the Zenit line can be focused on the United Kingdom, primarily due to the marketing activity and service of TOE. And secondly the originally heavy UK tax load of up to 2/3 on imported precision cameras. Substantial quantities were later sold by German discounters like Fotoquell and Neckermann. The main criticism of the USSR exporters at the time was that they could only supply hopelessly outdated equipment like the Zenit E that they had been directed to produce in quantity, despite having the capacity to produce more technically advanced products that might have been attractive to Western buyers. TOE were fighting a constant battle with their USSR suppliers in this direction, having to fill the gap left by the excellent but not for export Soviet lenses, which would have been a major selling point, by a hodgepodge selection of second-rate mass-market optics from Japan, albeit under the Helios label. Standard Zenit lenses The original Zenit came with the sturdy clickstop 4-element 3.5/50mm Zeiss Desai copy under the Industar designation. Early aluminium variants made in several different bodies were finely blue-coated, whereas the later mass-produced black version was either partially or uncoated with no visible color on the glass. They were sharp but gave the typically foggy image of an uncoated lens with bright lighting. With the iris ring sitting inside the focusing ring, it was impossible to focus at full aperture followed by stopping down, as this moved the point of focus. What makes these lenses interesting is their very compact pancake design in spite of their sloppy and unpractical construction. The concept of the makers was to offer a sharp Tissot type lens of the simplest possible body construction, leaving out all progress made in this field since 1945. The most prominent lens is the 6-element 2.0/58mm Helios based on the pre-war Zeiss Biota. Zenit also manufactures several tire lenses in different focal lengths, of which some were of 4-element pre-war Zeiss Sonnet design with the cemented second and ultra-fat third element. Camera models Early cameras Bottom loading, Zenit, Zenit S, Zenit 3, hinged back, crystal, Zenit 3M. Zenit 4-line semi-automatic cameras Zenit 4, Zenit 5, Zenit 6, list of Zenit DKL mount lenses, Mir 1 th 37mm f2.8, Vega 350mm f2.8, Helios 65 th 52mm f2.8, Jupiter 25 th 85mm f2.8, Tyre 38 th 133mm f2.8, Rubin 1 th 37 to 80mm f2.8. Zenit E line Models with a selenium cell light meter. Zenit E, Zenit EM, produced between 1972 to 1984 by KMZ. Zenit ET, Zenit 10, Zenit 11. Models without a selenium light meter, Zenit B, also known as Zenit B, Zenit BM, also known as Zenit BM. Cameras with TTL metering and M42 thread mount. Zenit TTL, Zenit 12, Zenit 12 XP, Zenit 12 SD, Zenit 122, Zenit 122V, also known as Zenit 122B, Zenit 312M, Zenit 412DX, Zenit 412LS. Cameras with TTL metering and Pentax K mount, Zenit 122K, Zenit 212K. Cameras with non-standard mounts Start, Zenit 7, Zenit D. M42 semi-automatic cameras Zenit 16, Zenit 19, Zenit 18, Zenit MT1 Surprise. Zenit Axe line Zenit Automat, also known as Zenit Auto, Zenit AM, Zenit AM2, Zenit APM, Zenit APK, Zenit KM, Zenit KM+. Photosnapper One oddity of the Zenit camera range is the so-called Photosnapper kit, which consists of a case, a gun stock and shoulder stock, filters, a 300mm f4.5 Tyre 3 lens, a normal lens and a Zenit adapted for the gun stock. The camera is actually held in the same manner as a rifle. Hence the name Photosnapper. Production models, FS2, FS3, FS12, FS12-3, FS122, FS412, low production and prototype only, FS4, FS4M, FS5. Enlargers, Zenit manufactured a large range of enlargers as well. Some of the best known are the models UPA5 and UPA6. UPA5 is a portable model which folds into a small suitcase. UPA6 is a more sophisticated enlarger for producing color photo prints. Citations. External links, in English, homepage of KMZ, complete KMZ cameras list, review of Zenit E by Stephen Dowling, review of first Zenit by Rick Elizen, Soviet Start SLR professional camera 1958-64 by Stephen Rothery, usephoto.com key catalog listing of all Zenit models, in Spanish, Zenit 122 manual in Spanish, in Russian. The KMZ&D Center site features a Russian language forum. However, if you ask a question in English you will receive an answer. In Greek, http://vintageWizTeleos blogspot Zenit 122 html.